Daphne. He heard about the store. Then he called and said he was going to go out on a hike, and we went out together. So we talked about him coming to speak tonight. I really appreciate Dave's availability, and this is going to be a little different than we've done in the past, but I think it's going to give us a bigger picture perspective on this topic that we're all interested in, as well as the research and the investigations that Dave has done on missing people. So, without further ado, would you welcome with me Dave Blaine.
Thanks to Jim and his crew for having me here.
You're welcome. I'll turn it off in a second.
So, the segment you're going to see right now is about missing people. And the reality of it is that I got started and I got some... And some people may have heard me on the radio years ago talking about Bigfoot. This first segment has nothing to do with Bigfoot. And a lot of people say, oh, you know, you're making claims that it does. I've never made a claim anywhere, privately or publicly, that we've documented have anything to do with it. I've never stated my personal feelings, and you're not going to hear them tonight. What you're going to hear is a series of facts that will shake your core. And they are pure facts about people who have disappeared. And your perception of the wilderness will change after tonight. That's a flat-out guarantee, because you're going to see things that the media won't talk about. I'm not going to exaggerate it. You're just going to hear how things have come together over the years for me and my team. How this started was several years ago, almost 5 years ago now. I was in a national park doing some peripheral research. Some people were following me around the park, which is kind of normal. And you learn when you go to a national park, you don't approach the rangers and you don't approach the national park staff. You want to approach the people that are contractors, because they're people like you and me. They're just working there. And they don't work for the government. They can say anything they want and they can tell the truth. So I was talking to contractors in the park. And contrary to what some people may think, the government employees can't talk. They can't talk and talk about personal feelings while they're on duty. They can just read the government line. And unfortunate or fortunate, however that may be, at the end of that day in the national park, I went back to this cabin off the national park property. It was getting dark. I get a knock on the door. There are two people standing there, and they said, "Hey, Dave, we're off-duty national park rangers, and we want to talk to you. And we have some information that we think is interesting, and you're going to want to know it. So can we please come in?" Sure. They come in, and that lasted about almost 3 hours. These two people said that they had worked in a series of national parks, each of them separately, over about 15 years. And during that time, they each had come to independent conclusions that there were a lot of missing people in national parks. Too many to be normal, they thought. And the conditions that they went didn't fit the circumstances of where they went missing and how long, etc. the investigations went on. And they stated at the front end, when the people went missing, there was a lot of press, there was a lot of publicity for 7 or 8 days. People weren't found, and then there was nothing. There was no follow-up, there was nothing. They didn't hear about it anymore. And they said when they went out to try to find out how many people went missing in these areas, they couldn't even find out, and they were rangers in the parks. And they said something's wrong. And they said, "You've got the background, you can try to figure this out." And they gave me a set of criteria and a set of data that they knew about at their individual parks, and they said this may help. And I'm shaking my head, I'm thinking, wow, this is unbelievable. Because the world I come from, 20 years as a police officer in a big city in California, any small, medium-sized city anywhere in the United States keeps track of missing people inside their jurisdiction. It's a flat-out guarantee. And the reason being is that those people are entered into national databases. If I'm a police officer in Denver and somebody's missing from Salt Lake City, I run your name through the system, I'm going to see you're missing. Without that sort of conjunctive connection between two jurisdictions, you're never going to find people. Or say I come across a parked car up here in the woods, I run the license plate, unless I know that the person was missing was associated with that. I may not know that nothing's wrong, and I may not impound the car. Everyone with me so far? So starting off, when we started to go through reports of missing people, you start reading 5, 10, 15, 20, things aren't real apparent. When you start reading 7, 8, 900, certain things are starting to come to you as repetitive in nature. When you start reading 3,000 and 4,000 cases, things start to solidify. And all of us had these piles of reports surrounding us that had these commonalities with us. As an example, at the top there, victims with disabilities. All of a sudden, we're getting a big pile of missing people that have disabilities. Disabilities that they can't walk real far. Disabilities that they have bad hips. An 84-year-old man that can't walk a block disappears and can't be found. All of a sudden, this pile starts to get large. Now you have victims with disabilities, meaning they have autism or Alzheimer's. But on the opposite end of that, we start to notice there's highly intellectual people. I'm talking highly intellectual people that have disappeared and not been found. There's 4 physicists that have disappeared in the last few years and have never been found. There's a German man from Los Angeles that was here from Germany. He was a professor in physics at a big university there. He was here for a convention. He was with people walking through the woods in a line. He gets tired. He sits down with another counselor on the hike. He says, I'm going to go meet up with the group. There's hardly any place to go other than this trail. He disappeared. They searched for him for 3 weeks. They never found him. Where did he go? Nobody knows. We start to get this feeling in us that sooner or later, these people are going to be found. The reality of it is, you can't be feeling this way. It's not normal for people to disappear and not be found. It's not normal. Now, there's a certain element in society that disappear and don't want to be found. So, that's part of the exclusionary process in what we are lining our books with out there. If somebody has a mental disability, we won't include them. If somebody is associated with a drowning, we won't include them in our books or our research. It's part of the exclusion. Now, when we start to go down this list, canines. We have this big stack of reports where people disappeared with dogs. Doesn't make sense. Or the dog runs away and they run to chase the dog and they disappear. And both are gone. And in fact, there's a case as we speak that you're going to hear about in a little bit of a Los Angeles firefighter paramedic that disappeared under those exact circumstances. I got 100 emails in the last 5 days about it. They said, this is right, exactly like what you said. Well, I know. The other key part is when you and I walk down a trail, dressed just like I am today, we're going to leave a trail of scent. And that scent trail, believe it or not, could be there for weeks. They bring bloodhounds and canines in, and sometimes the dog will walk in a circle at the point of the trailhead and just sit down. Other times the dog will walk to the trailhead and look at the master and sit down. The master said, I have never seen the dog act like this. There's either not a scent there or it doesn't want to work, and that's not normal because every scent dog wants to work. They get out of their car, they're ready to go. They're happy to work. In these cases, they don't find a scent, and they won't find a scent. The victims, if they are found, they're found near or in dry creek beds or creeks and rivers. National parks are a big part of this, and you'll see that in a little bit. There's a very odd phenomenon that when we started to track this, it goes back to my police officer days, that when we were dealing with a serial criminal, say a bank robber, we'd get out a map and we'd plot all the locations where the person hid. And usually if it turns out to be a circle, where does the suspect live? In the middle of the circle. And the first time they hit was probably the closest to their house. So I always got in the process of mapping things. And you're going to see how this came about. And there's a geographical clustering to this that can't be explained. Mountains foods and waters are going to be predominant on that clustering. Berries. There's a whole series of people in my books that have disappeared while they were berry hunting. You're going to go, that's kind of weird. I'm going to say that's really weird. But when they're looking for huckleberries, they usually are never found. Can't explain that. That's the truth. Swamps are associated, especially with East Coast disappearances. And this is true. A lot of times little 2- and 3-year-old kids are found in the middle of a swamp on a dry piece of land. They can't remember anything, they don't know how they got there, and they don't know how to swim. And they're dry. Many times when the victim is found, either they have a disability and they can't talk, or they're too young to talk, or they don't remember what happened. Most of the time when a victim is found, they're found in a semi-conscious or a completely unconscious state. And if they're unconscious, they're face down. Can't explain. Many, many times they're missing clothes or shoes or both. And they can't explain it. Many times the clothes and the shoes are never found. 85% of the disappearances are in the afternoon or early evening. If the victim's found, a high percentage of the time, they're found in an area that has already been searched. Sometimes searched 50 times, according to other searchers. I'm going to say this right now. I do not believe that search and rescue teams are that incompetent. And I never would say that. I don't think the people were there when the search teams were looking. Many times, a small little victim is found in the middle of a trail when searchers are going out day to day to search. Almost as though they were placed there to be found. Weather. Many times, bad weather is either happening as the person disappears or immediately after they disappear. In some of the instances, record weather comes in. There's a disappearance called Dennis Martin. It rained 6 inches in the first 3 days and didn't stop raining for 8 days. Destroys any scent, destroys any tracks. Very hard for searchers. Let me get on the National Park Service just for a bit. When we got this information from the park rangers, it's pretty common to say, okay, these guys must know what's going on. They're pretty competent. We've got to listen to them. Well, the federal government has a law called the Freedom of Information Act. And it says that you, as a citizen, are entitled to any document that doesn't violate national security. And you're entitled to that document for just the fees that it costs them to recover those documents, meaning copy fees and a very small clerical fee. The National Park Service, unbelievably, has their own rules. They interpreted the Freedom of Information Act totally different than everybody else. So, we filed and we said we want a list of missing people from Yosemite. Then we filed a week later and we said we want a list from the entire National Park Service system. So, 3 or 4 weeks later, an attorney from the National Park Service calls me and says, why do you want that information? If any of you ever filed, you need to know that that cannot be a legitimate question in the process, and it can't be used as a question to determine if you get the documents or not, because that's against the law. I said, why are you asking me that? He doesn't, well, I just want to know. I said, it's irrelevant to the conversation. We're interested in missing people, I just want to get them. He goes, well, we don't have any lists of missing people. I said, wait a minute. I said, maybe I'm asking the question wrong. No. People that have gone missing in Yosemite during the last, say, let's start at 10 years. I just want to see that list that you have. No, we don't have a list. I said, then how do you know when people have gone missing? Well, we rely on the institutional memory of our employees. That's a quote. I said, okay, so I do want that list. And he said, well, okay. I said, I'm going to claim the author's exemption. And there's an exemption in the Freedom of Information Act that if you are a published author, and I am, by Hancock House, was my first publisher, and I want an author's exemption, and I want the list. And he comes back right away. He says, your books aren't in enough libraries. I said, how many libraries do I need to be in? He says, well, I'm not going to disclose that information. Okay. So I said, well, how much is it going to cost me? I'm figuring they're going to say a couple grand. From Yosemite, he said 34,000 it's going to cost. And if you want it from the whole system, it's 1.4 million, and it's in email form. Now, the latest character assassination that they tried was that man right there at the bottom, Jeff Christensen, disappeared. Rocky Mountain National Park under very, very strange circumstances. He wasn't found for 8 days, and he was found in an area that had been searched 20 times. The Rocky Mountain National Park rangers didn't even find their own man. They didn't know he was missing for 24 hours. Now, at the time while they're searching for him, they heard gunshots inside the park, which is very strange. You never hear gunshots inside a national park. And they heard clicking on the radio. He was a law enforcement ranger, so he carried a gun and he had a radio. When the rangers in the park didn't find him, some people just passing through the park happened to locate him. Now, the reason I know all this is because the archives for about 2 weeks digging up every article I could find on this event. Now, they found him with his head bandaged, deceased, meaning he lived for a certain period of time. So, we've again filed for a Freedom of Information Act for the report on a special event. They brought in a special investigation team to look into this event because a ranger died and was missing for so long. So it's a big file, probably 200 or 300 pages. They said, well, if you want that file, we're going to have to review it and redact it first. And that's going to cost you $7,200. Now, the reason I wanted that file, I want to see if Christensen fired his gun, number one. Number two, I want to see how many injuries they say he had on his body. Number three, I want to see how many times that area was searched in an area he was supposedly last seen in, but nobody found him. The guy was a stud. He was a ski patrolman during the winter. If anyone was going to live, Jeff was going to live. But nobody's going to see that file. Yet, by law, we have a right to see it, but we're not going to see it. Okay, so this is the latest cluster map that we put together after almost 5 years of research. When we first started, there were 38 clusters of disappearances. Now there's 58. What I want everyone to pay attention to is some key things here. Right down the middle of the state. What is not in the middle of the United States? Mountains and a lot of water. Mountains and water. What's key on that first thing? As you go up, start right about here, you got the Sierra Nevada mountains. And you got the Pacific Ocean 250 miles away. As you keep going north, it turns into the Cascades, and you got big mountains and volcanoes starting right about here, all the way up. Olympic National Park, cluster. All of these, Mount Rainier National Park, cluster. Mount Rainier has somebody missing right now. Just went missing a couple days ago. As you come around to Idaho, big mountains. Then you go into Colorado, Rocky Mountain National Park right there. A little further south, another cluster. Mesa National Park. This is Uinta Wilderness in Utah. This is the border of Oklahoma and Arkansas. This is a Great Smoky Mountain National Park right here. Pay attention, the Appalachian Trail. Water. Now what's happened just recently, since I put this map together, completely encompasses the Great Lakes. You put that together, floored. Floored about this. Why? Because as we're digging into the archives and we're reading, everyone on this team is reading all kinds of books all the time. Turns out, I don't know if anybody knows this, the Great Lakes has been called the second Bermuda Triangle for over 100 years. I never knew that. There's been dozens and dozens and dozens of boats and ships that have disappeared under strange circumstances, and planes, and I'm talking big commercial jetliners, and Air Force planes that have disappeared and never been found. I didn't learn that until we started mapping this. So, the big thing on the map, mountains and water. This is unreal to us. This whole middle section of the U.S. is very strange. Now, we kind of cut it off here, didn't get all of Canada in. But as you go up into this area of Canada, there's so much water over there because it's probably 1/3 water in this area of Canada. And then over in this area of British Columbia, it's again really close to water. There are some strange disappearances in Florida, no clusters. This is a cluster right here, 3 people disappeared in one incident. This is something that threw a lot of people that said, Dave, you really know what's taking these people. Until this last book came out, you really know, and you're holding back information. The reality of it is, the longer you keep going with research, the more you understand. And as long as the profile fits, then we keep doing the research and we'll keep including disappearances. Just because a disappearance occurs on the water doesn't mean it doesn't fit our profile. And that one in Florida threw a lot of people because it fits the profile and it was on the water. Questions about the map?
Hawaii?
Hawaii has one disappearance on it that fits. And it was an autistic boy that disappeared at a home. And within feet of his disappearance, they found his clothes laid out. And they found him about a week and a half later, and he couldn't explain where he was. I'm sorry, Alaska has quite a few. Quite a few, yeah.
What part of Rocky Mountain National Park was Jeff Christensen found it? Did they disclose that?
Yeah, they did. It was in all the articles, and I think it was under Mount Chiquita. I'm pretty sure, but I don't quote me on it. 1,200 cases rolling around.
I understand.
But it's in the book. Yeah.
Does your mapping extend as far north above Alaska as the Mackenzie Mountain Range?
So we didn't really, down here is Alaska. There's the disappearances in Alaska down here. Again, it's a small map for a giant area. But I don't care where in Alaska somebody disappears. If it fits, it's going to go.
This would be just above Alaska, at the border, the right.
Down here?
Northern right corner of the state.
We would include it if it was there. Maybe I've never heard about it. Yes, sir.
What about Portland, Oregon?
So we don't do urban disappearances, meaning cities. Suburban disappearances, yes. There was one in Salt Lake where a small boy, 10 or 11 years old, went out to walk his dog in the mountains by his house, disappeared. It fit the profile, it's in the book. Sir?
Yeah, you're not relating this to Sasquatches, but I'm sure most people here see a direct correlation between sightings of Sasquatches and what you got here.
Did you hear what I said about Florida?
Well, yeah, I heard.
I was in the Sasquatch business for a while. I never saw one in the ocean.
I read articles where they swamp apes, skunk apes, all that. I don't know. I just pointed that.
Please read the books, your paradigm will shift. Yes, sir.
Has it been easier to find cases looking, now that you know, you're kind of, I see you're starting to uncover around water, around mountains. Since you made that discovery, has it been easier to uncover more, to kind of know the concept?
You know what's happened is that people like you, your awareness is up. The more people I tell, and the more shows I'm on, the more emails I get, and the more aware I that was a good wake-up call. So that has helped, the awareness from other people, because we can't cover every small little newspaper, but more of you out there can hear about things and tell me. That helps. Sir?
The profile you're talking about was generally on the first page?
Yes, sir.
You have urban and suburban in this?
Urban is one of the exclusions.
So are there any other exclusions?
Drownings, mental health issues. Yes?
With regards to the Midwest, you have some significant rivers such as the Mississippi, you have not seen a lot of clusters there. Help me understand that.
So, where the Mississippi starts in northern Minnesota,
Right.
disappearances there that will just knock your socks off.
Okay.
And there are some along the river, but what I tell people is, don't rest your soul on the cluster, okay? Just because there's a cluster there doesn't really mean a lot to me. In fact, like you said, if we follow the Mississippi down within a 50-mile radius of the Mississippi as you follow, there's a lot of cases. Yes, sir.
Having read your books, you have two profile types in your book. One is people hiking, specifically all of a sudden a snowstorm occurs after they disappear while they're hiking and everything's missing at that point. Your second one is people potentially being jettisoned off of cliffs while they're hiking because of the nature of how far out from the cliff they actually wound up being discovered at the bottom of cliffs. The two cases in Colorado fit both of those. I'm wondering if you're working on those. The kid in Fort Collins that fell off of Long Peak down 1,000 feet to his death. Nobody knows how he got off the cliff and whether that fits the profile. And the other one is the McManus father and son up in Echo Lake and Mount Evans that disappeared. I've never heard if they were ever found.
Too early to tell on that.
April 4th when they disappeared.
When you read the stories about what their family said, they weren't ready for that severe weather. That was one of the problems. So it's hard to say. Until they find out what happened, they find the bodies, it's hard to say. There's other more recent cases in Colorado that fit it to a T. I'll talk about in a little bit. One more question, and then we're going to move on. Yeah?
Is there a connection, or can you say, with UFO sighting clusters?
Not that I can say. That's not saying there's not.
Right.
Good. So, let's talk about current events. People always say, hey, what's going on right now? Well, this hits on a couple keys. First of all, it's a cluster area, Mount Rainier. This woman disappeared just a couple days ago. She was an outdoor writer in Washington, really, really famous. Hiking with, now listen carefully, hiking with a partner. Her and her partner take a rest. She says, I'm just going to go up the trail a little bit. I'll be right back. They stop right below, they hit the snow zone. He says, I wait. She doesn't come back. I walk up. She's not there. Huge search going on the fourth day. Not found. Unbelievable. This is another thing. People who are either leading on the trail and that you can't see them, or people falling behind on the trail. This is what we write about. There was an article written in the Huffington Post, and the title of it was, Don't Be Last in Line. And I read the book and said that. Okay? So anyhow, currently, search and rescue going on right now on Mount Rainier for this lady. They have no clues, have found nothing. It's a case just outside of Lake Tahoe. I've been in this area 100 times. Very near the American River, fished that area many, many times. Kid went up to stay at his folks' house, cabin, said he was going to go on a short afternoon hike, disappeared. We're going on 2 weeks, not found, no equipment, no nothing. How many people heard about this firefighter? One, two, couple? Firefighter, paramedic from Arcadia, California. Mike Erdman, right here. He and a buddy went hiking in an area in Ventura County, real remote, rocky, desolate. He hiked in for a couple days. As they're setting up camp, Erdman brings his dog. As they're setting up the camp, the dog takes off running. Erdman, wearing just shorts and a t-shirt, takes off to get the dog. Partner waits, calls, yells. The dog's gone, he's gone. So the partner goes to sleep that night, says, oh, maybe in the morning I'll have better luck. Searches the next day. Can't find the dog, can't find Mike. Decides, I'm going to leave my pack here, I'll go in and I'll get help. He packs out. That was a week ago, I think last Friday or Thursday, still not found, dog not found. Unbelievable story because he's barefoot. Again, a canine and a person disappear simultaneously. Everyone look at this for a second. Anyone tell me what the common denominator is? Give up? Yeah.
Who provided themselves?
By themselves? Anybody else?
Yes, in National Park.
They're all physicians. They all went missing. And they all went missing under very, very strange circumstances. I'll go through it quickly. This woman right here, car parked off the highway next to a lake in Indiana. They searched the lake for a week. The FBI brought in a team and searched the lake. Day 9, a fisherman on that lake finds her body. Didn't drown. Unknown cause of death. McGrogan, anybody know him? Happened right near here. Happened just outside of Dale. Happened in March. He and a group of physicians from Indiana go cross-country skiing on a trail. They're going to go backpacking for 3 or 4 days. McGrogan's carrying, he's a physician from Indiana, and he's carrying GPS, cell phone. Everybody sits on the trail and they say, oh, he says, hey, I'm going to go up ahead. I'll meet you at the next stop. They say, sure. He takes off, goes ahead. They get to the next stop. He's not there. Well, maybe he's going to meet us at the next stop. They go to the next stop. They know something's wrong. They go back. They get search and rescue. They search for 7 days. They find nothing. A couple days later, some people just happen to be going along a frozen set of falls 4.5 miles away from the trail at the closest point. And he's dead at the bottom of the falls. Question. The search and rescue coordinator for the sheriff's office is interviewed on Channel 9 News, and they say, well, can you tell us what happened? The guy looks quizzically and goes, we don't understand how he got there or how he fell. Because he had GPS. And it's not only a valley, but it's also a mountain away from where he was at. It's bizarre. Rachel Bagnall, her parents called me. So she's a physician. She's going to South America the next year to do volunteer work. This is one of her last trips up in British Columbia. Her and her boyfriend, who's an attaché for the government in Quebec, go backpacking into a real remote area. They go to the donut shop, they get some coffee, there's a seat in the car, they drive 5 miles into the wilderness, they park the car, there's no trace, there's no prints, there's nothing. I communicated with the search and rescue coordinator for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. He says it's one of the strangest cases he's ever worked. They never found a backpack, utensils, a camp, helmet, nothing. The mom said, what did they do wrong? What's going on? Bad weather hit the area right after they went in. The Royal Canadian Mounted Policeman said it's one of the most remote areas in Canada. But the trail is real clear, you're not going to get lost. I said, what happened? He goes, I've never had this happen, I don't know. So, talk about intellectual. This woman disappeared in England, fits the profile, she was a physician, went for an afternoon walk, disappeared. Catherine Wong, skiing at Bear Valley Ski Resort. Her and her husband, the last ski trip of the day. They're at the top of the lift. She goes, I'll go this way, you go that way, I'll meet you at the bottom of the mountain. He goes, great. You go to the bottom of the mountain, she doesn't come down. Notify ski patrol. Now remember this, folks. This isn't rocket science. You go down a ski slope, and what's off to the side normally in the woods? Powder. There might be a few trails. There's not a lot of trails. It's not going to take you a week to figure out that you can cover every trail in that area and figure out where it goes. So they went back and forth for 2 weeks. Couldn't find anything. And then I think it was 8 days, big snowstorm comes in and they give up. It starts to evaporate in June. Can't find anything. Finally, a couple weeks later, more snow, and they find pieces of her bones. They find pieces of her clothing. That's it. And that's exactly what they find in most of these cases. The sheriff comes out and says, well, best we can tell is probably a bear got her. Folks, February, in the middle of winter, I've been to Bear Valley many times. There are no bear that are out. Joe Elliott Blakesley, Crater of the Moons National Park. Anybody ever heard of that case? Can you tell us about it?
Two ladies went hiking, left their dogs in their truck, and for some period of time they were searched for. And then we had a government shutdown, they stopped searching, and then they found them in very remote areas of that park.
Anybody ever been to Craters of the Moon? Can you tell me about it?
It's desolate. There's hockey.
Easy walking? Easy walking off the trail?
Well, they don't really like to walk off the trails. They have a farm.
Pretty well defined.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to walk them. It's lava blocks, but you have to walk them.
Treacherous.
Yeah.
So both these ladies, one is a physician and one is a retired school teacher. And let me explain that these are large women, okay? And their family said they're not going off the trail. And they're not going out of sight of their truck because their dogs are there, and they're not leaving their dogs in the truck for more than an hour. There's no way. So they start searching with that mindset, and they're not having any luck. And then they start expanding. A week into the search, and a mile into the lava field, they find one deceased. They keep searching, and out further and further. A month into the search, they find Blakesley 2.5 miles in an area that had overflights for the previous month, deceased. I filed the Freedom of Information Act on this case. The Park Service delayed the response for 9 months. I got a 1-page flyer that explains that those two were missing, and they said, we didn't write any reports or write any memos about this case, but the local sheriff's department did. Okay. Idaho has something just like the Freedom of Information Act. Mandatory disclosure of public documents. I send my first letter to the sheriff, I get no response, so I call. The sheriff's, this is a really small county, you probably got 30 deputies. The sheriff's secretary answers the phone and goes, what do you want? I said, well, I'm just trying to get a hold of the sheriff because I want to get a copy of the reports on this case. We're not releasing those documents. Why? It's up to the sheriff. So, I sent a certified letter, a copy of the Idaho law, saying I want a copy of the reports. Never responded, refused to respond, no reports. So we need to have some attorney file an injunction against the sheriff to get the reports. But as of right now, we know nothing about how they got into those lava fields, what happened to those ladies, nothing. This man right here, I'm showing you that this is an international issue for a reason. It'll become apparent pretty soon. This man was a physician in Ukraine, took a walk in a park right on the outskirts of Kiev. Right on the outskirts, but it's a pretty wild area. Disappeared, never found. Big search, never found. This man in Tucson, Arizona, was staying at an off-site facility, disappeared, right on the edge of the mountains. Searched for a week, didn't find him. 9th day, they find him about 100 yards behind the building, deceased. Cause of death, undetermined. It's another thing on these cases, very strange. Coroners can't determine the cause of death. Gary Dank was 61 years, Sequoia National Park, disappeared, found 3 days later, undetermined cause of death, off a trail. Anybody know the Von Gortler case? Another Colorado case. Makana and Michael Von Gortler. Michael was an ER physician in Boulder. His daughter was a student at University of Colorado Boulder. They went to take a hike on Mount Missouri. Beautiful day. No wind, no clouds. Nothing. They disappeared. He was divorced from his ex-wife. Wife calls, daughter doesn't respond. She calls search and rescue saying this is where they went to supposedly go. They found his car at the trailhead. 8-day search goes on. Nothing. Nothing. The 9th day, a Cobra helicopter flying the same path to the summit of Mount Missouri every day, all of a sudden sees 2 bodies down on the slope. They go down, recover the bodies. massive facial trauma on both. The sheriff's interviewed at the county and says, what happened? I don't know. I don't know how two people fell off that mountain to their death on a beautiful day when it's not steep like you would think it was steep, or why they would both fall. It makes no sense. Right. This is another case of a missing physician. And I put this in here because this is the obituary that was written. Dead November 21st, 2009 on Mount Washington from unexplained injuries of his head and body, sustained while hiking. I just put that in because I'm not making this stuff up. When an obituary says that, you know it's pretty strange. And it's a physician. Go ahead. This is the Grogan's case again. And I'm putting out 3 skiers found the remains of a deceased male in the ice falls below Blue Falls, about 4.5 miles from the trail he was on. It's bizarre. How did he get there? It's nearly impossible under the conditions that were there. Go ahead. Again, this is the Von Bortler case, Connor and Michael. Go ahead. Next. Common denominator, anybody tell me?
Female.
Obviously all women, but all ladies that were never found. Teresa Beer, Shut-Eye Peak, very, very near Yosemite, and the largest cluster of missing people in the world. Stacey Harris, Yosemite. The only case I've ever talked to the National Park Service for, and they told me blatantly, you will never see that case. And I asked why, and they said, because we're not going to give it to you. So why? And they didn't give a reason. Now, there's a big difference. Criminal cases that police investigate and missing person cases. Criminal cases have a possibility of going for prosecution. So maybe they're not going to tell you all the facts because they don't want all the facts out. Missing people is a total animal, different animal altogether. There's no crime that's occurred. They identified that. Harris's case, classified missing person. I asked the guy, are there any suspects? No. Is it a criminal case? No. Is it just missing persons? Yes. Why aren't you releasing it? None of your business. Stacy was with her dad and a group of 6 other people on horseback riding through the backcountry. They got off for the night. She walked up to a peak with an elderly man who sat there, and everybody saw him sit there. She says, I'm walking down to that lake to take some pictures. Everybody sees her go out of sight down into that valley. The only thing they ever found was the lens cap of her camera on the trail as she entered the lake region. She was never found. Nothing about her was ever found. Trinity Gibson, Great Smoky Mountain National Park, was with a group on a field trip. Everybody in the group is watching Stacy walk down the trail ahead of them. She steps to the side of the trail and she looks off the trail like as though, this is the words of the people in her class, she's looking at something. She steps off the trail, people are 100 feet behind her. They walk up, she's not there, she's never seen again. There were accusations that she ran away, and that's how she disappeared. Well, that was in 1976, and no one has ever seen her or ever heard of her again. By the way, there were 3 disappearances in Great Smoky Mountain National Park in a fairly short period of time, and all 3 of those people were never found. Lynn Olson, Pinedale, Wyoming. Her grandparents owned a dude ranch in one of the most beautiful areas you could ever imagine. Anybody ever been to Green River Lakes? That's where it happened. Back then, her parents owned this little mountaintop right at the end of the lakes, a serene location. Her brother sees her walk down to the bottom of the lake as though she's going to sunbathe. After a while, nobody sees her. Huge search. On the top of this knoll, they find a pile of her clothes. She's never found again. She's never heard of again. And where that mountain goes, there's long ways of nothing but wilderness. Marjorie West disappears in northern Pennsylvania, picking wildflowers. Anna Christian Waters disappears in Half Moon Bay in her backyard in a very rural region right after a storm. Thelma Melton, Great Smoky Mountain National Park, on the trail walking ahead of a group of other women. She gets out of sight on the trail, disappears, never seen again, never heard of. Gloria McDonald on the trail with her family says, I'm getting tired, I'm going back. This is right near the Oklahoma border. She goes back. People in the parking lot said she never got back to the car. Huge search, she's never seen it again. Ruth Jacobus, Amador County, right on the verge of Yosemite. Her husband is out tilling a field on a tractor, and she's just riding along and they're talking. He drops her off 200 feet from their house. Tracks show she never got back to the house, never found, never seen again. Common denominator. Anybody tell me this one? This might be a hard one. I heard Europeans. Anybody else? Students? Anybody else? Who said that? That's right. Wow. First time anyone's ever got it. Congratulations.
I'm studying.
What did he say? I like it. These are all runners, trail runners, long distance runners, athletes in phenomenal shape. Ginkowski disappeared on Mount Tamalpais in Northern California, right near San Francisco, and right next to Point Reyes National Park, where there are 2 other women that I've written about who disappeared. She disappears for 4 days. We kind of give up the search. On the 5th day, they find her in a gully in a region that there are no trails and she shouldn't be. 5 days later, another woman disappears in the same park under almost identical conditions, also deceased. There was a big lid capped on this because they wanted to quell people because everyone thought there was some kind of serial killer. So far, no disclosure on the cause of death of these 2 women, but they are within each about 6 miles of the location of the women that disappeared at Point Reyes. Andrew Jarzik. This is the one time you're going to hear me talk about an urban case. One time. This man got home and he was training for a marathon. He gets home at 1 in the morning after partying with some friends. Friends said he wouldn't hardly drink anything, but he wanted to train. So right along a river in New Jersey, there's a running path, a paved path, and everyone during the day, there's like hundreds of runners. But at 1 in the morning, there's hardly anybody. Andrew puts on his running stuff, takes off, and they caught him on a videotape running down the cement path right next to the river. Wearing running clothes. He disappears. Nobody can figure out what happened to him. He's a straight-laced kid. Search for him for a week, nothing. 10 days later, he's found in the river. Nobody can figure out how he got in the river. And I put him in the script because of a couple of reasons. Victor Tenney is a world-famous runner. He disappeared just outside of Spain on some islands that he lived on. And I'm going to talk more about him in a little bit. Here, this is a Hawaii case. This is fairly recent. It's from the European region. Disappeared on a run on a trail in Hawaii, found at the bottom of a cliff. Jonathan Ajay was at the Devil's Punch Bowl in Southern California. LA County Sheriff went for a day run before he went to work. Talk about more about him. Mika True. Have you ever heard of him? World famous trail runner. I'm talking super famous. Disappeared in New Mexico on a run. Found dead, half laying in a creek with his shoes off. Boucher, Ontario, lived right next to one of the Great Lakes. Every morning for 20 years, the man got up and went running before he went to work. He was a science teacher. One morning he didn't come back. Huge search. And we're talking, it was like 10 degrees below zero, but every morning he ran. The lake was frozen solid. He lived and he ran through a wildlife area. They didn't find him. After everything starts to thaw out, they find one of his shoes in an area that had been searched 10 times. Then they find his body up off the lake, dead. No shoes on. No cause of death on him yet either. But he wasn't there. Everybody says he wasn't there. Searched 50 times. Michael Lamonte, if you guys read my books, Seaward, Alaska, he was running the Mount Marathon race. Last person up the mountain. One of the timers says, hey, you want me to walk with you or anything? He goes, no, I'm good, I'm good. This is my first race. It's a heck of a steep climb. He goes, I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it. So the timer goes down the fast way. Michael goes around the backside. There's no place, folks, look this up when you get home. Mount Marathon, Seward, Alaska, look at the pictures. Not a lot of places to get lost. Not only did he get lost, they never found him. Anybody ever watch Alaska State Troopers show? There's a 15-minute segment in one show about this event because it's so strange. This is, anyhow, no signs of trauma, body believed. They can't figure out why the guy died. Next. This is the area of Devil's Punch Bowl. What I write about is that people oftentimes disappear in the area where there's devil or hell or some unusual connotation to the area. Anybody know where Devil's Lookout is over by Deckers? So, well, you read my books and I'll talk a little bit about it later. There's a couple of people that have disappeared in that region. Very strange cases. This area right here is where he disappeared. Now, so talk about boulders and granite having something to do, but I don't know what. Ajay disappears June 11th. He was a canine officer. On June 25th, his dog died. How strange is that? Of natural conditions. It's very strange. And he was never found. LA County threw everything into this search. He was off duty, but they threw everything into it. They couldn't believe they didn't find him. Next. Oh, again, this is Mate and Mount Marathon, right? Mika True. They said he died of cardiomyopathy. The interesting thing about that is that his legs were in 10 inches of water, his shoes were off, creek bed, lack of shoes. They didn't find him for days. Next. And Victor Tenney, triathlete, ran in the that big triathlon race in Hawaii. Yeah, ran that. He was world class. This is the area that he disappeared on during a hike. There's nothing to disappear on. There's nothing to hide in. And there's a lot of these disappearances like this. Part of the search, him running the Ironman, real good looking guy. Still's never been found. Now, here's something you're going to hear from me. Just because the disappearances occur here in National Park, it's kind of strange. There's disappearances in other national parks in other countries too. Weird, huh? But so, Norway resident, again, intellectual, training in the Waianae Mountains. I've been there many times. Not that rough, not that difficult. He had ran there for days beforehand. Knew the trail inside out and backwards. Nobody could believe he ran off the trail and died. Nobody could believe it. Next. Jarzik, we talked about next. Again, next step. Again, we talked about Jankowski, Mount Tamalpais. Next. This is the other woman right here who disappeared on Mount Tamalpais. Next. Common denominator. Again, talked about it before. Anybody know the Vanek case? Anybody knows? So, Mount of the Holy Cross. Anybody know where that is? Anybody climb it? A couple people? So she was climbing it with a friend on September 24th, 2005. She's within 400 feet of the summit, and she says, I'm going to sit down and just wait. I'm getting too tired. I'm not going anywhere. You summit, I'll be right here. Don't worry. The guy summits, is back within a short period of time, she's not there. Scratch her head because she is a triathlete herself. This goes back to the runners and the athletes that disappeared. She's also a mother of two. Never found, never seen again. A massive search. Massive. They bring in cadaver dogs weeks later. They bring in canines. They can't find a scent. They can't find anything on this lady. Cheeseman Reservoir. Within 5 miles of Devil's Lookout over there by Deckers, Teresa Schmidt is with her husband, who's a physician, at a physician's conference at Lost Valley Guest Ranch. She says she's going to go up here on this peak and just go for a short day hike. This was right after a fire the year before had wiped out that area and there were no trees. It was pretty barren. Right up above Cheesman Reservoir. They find one track on this side of the ridge and one track on the other side. She's never found. Talked about Eris Gibson. Christine Kalika, Terrace Bay, Ontario. She went for a hike while she was, a morning run in an area right next to a lake. Kind of thick with bush, but it was a paved path. It wasn't dirt. She disappeared. Huge search. Dogs found nothing. Susan Adams, with her husband, went backpacking into the Bitterroot Mountains, Bitterroot Wilderness. They've got a big camp. There's like 8 or 9 people in this camp. It's a professional elk hunting camp set up in the middle of nowhere. She tells her husband, I'm just going to walk 100 yards out here to take some pictures. I'll be right back. She walks out, everybody in camp sees her go, doesn't come back. They get on their sat phones, calling the army, everybody, search, never found, camera never found, nothing she had on was ever found, gone. It's a very sad slide. Boys have all disappeared in the wilderness, never found. Dennis Martin, a famous case I talk about it on almost every show I'm on. It's the most bizarre thing. There's only 2 cases I know about where the Green Berets were called in to search. This is one. Green Berets, you have to sign a secrecy oath when you join the Green Berets, meaning you don't talk about things you do. 99.99999% of the time, National Guardsmen are brought in to help with searches. Who are National Guardsmen? They're people from our community. They're you and me that are going out to help the search. This time the Green Berets are called in. They tell Rocky Mountain, or Big Smoky Mountain National Park Rangers, we don't need your help. We'll search alone. They set up their own communication system. They search alone for a week. They get back in their helicopters and leave. Dennis never found. Dennis Johnson, Yellowstone National Park, disappears. At the same time, his sister disappeared. His sister's found a few hours later. Dennis is never found.
Is she alive or dead?
Alive. Anybody remember the Chris Vigil case? Grey Rock Mountain, out of Fort Collins. Very, very famous case. I'm going to talk a lot about it later. I guarantee you, unless you read my book, you never heard of this case. Alfred Beelart's 4 years old, disappeared Rocky Mountain National Park. Another very famous case that you probably never heard about, you should know about. Never found. Chris Harvey, Hinsdale County, near Pagosa Springs. Anybody ever heard of that case? 14-year-old boy out walking his dog from his parents' summer home up against the national wilderness. Disappeared, never found. Sheriff said, I'll give you the case, I'll give you the case, I'll give you the case. Never gave me the case. Said he was going to put a special team on it to investigate it. They have about 10 deputies in the whole county. They never did anything. Refused to give up the case. I don't think he has the case. I think it's gone. Douglas Lake, Newcomb, New York, at his family's compound in the wilderness, disappears. This case and the Martin case are the only 2 cases I know of Green Berets brought in. They tracked Douglas Lake up around northern New York in a 40-mile span through the roughest part of New York in the high peaks, and lost him in the middle of a swamp and was never found. Sammy Belkey, Crater Lake National Park, autism. Him and his dad, he got out of the car, ran to the top of a small bluff, took off running. His dad got to the top of the bluff, couldn't believe he didn't see him. Huge search, Sammy Belkey, never found. Crater Lake National Park, Derek Anderson, cutting down a Christmas tree just on the periphery of the national park, disappeared with his dad and his grandfather, never found. Edward Nye, just on the outskirts of Crater Lake National Park, on a church outing, fishing, disappeared, never found. James Bordenkircher, North Lake Tahoe, his parents drove up to their summer home next to the wilderness. They have a swing. James gets out, gets on the swing. Everybody gets out of their car, runs in the house. His 14-year-old brother says he wasn't in the house 30 seconds. He comes back outside. The swing is still swinging. His brother's gone. They start yelling for his brother. He's too cold. They start searching for him. never found. Now, how many people in here have kids? Raise your hand. Hi, you have kids. Okay, let's stop this. Just go ahead and leave that up right now. Let me ask you a question. 2-year-old, in the wilderness, how far could that 2-year-old go in one day? If you were the search coordinator, how far would you set your perimeter at?
Mile.
Mile. How high up would your 2-year-old climb? Never, they'll go downhill. Anybody else think they'll go uphill? Anybody? Okay, let's say they could go uphill. How far uphill would a 2-year-old go? 50 yards. Anybody else? Huh?
15 feet.
15 feet. Only somebody that's close, right? Right. Okay, so think about that as we move forward tonight. And you're going to hear some things that a lot of search and rescue people, and a lot of law enforcement people want to reconcile in their mind because it's the impossible. I had 2 kids. I know that my kids are born lazy most of the time. Good A class. But, unless they're playing sports. Okay, next slide. Charles McCullers, we're going to talk something about impossible journeys. McCullers went to Crater Lake National Park right before he was to enter college because he wanted to photograph the national parks during the winter months. So he went to Crater Lake, January 29th. People saw him come into the park and saw him walk up to the rim of this giant lake in a giant volcanic basin. It's one of the most beautiful parks you will ever go to. The water in it is absolutely pure. The scenes are gorgeous. So, McCullers goes there, nobody thinks much about it, and he disappears. Now, his father comes out, and he says, no, this isn't right. He tries to get the FBI to investigate it, they say no. He tries to get the National Park to help. They essentially say, there's no place for him to go. There's 20-foot drifts of snow. We looked all around, there's no path leading the way. He didn't come in on cross-country skis. He didn't have any snowshoes. We don't know where he went. He probably went back to the city and just fell out of society, right? Next. I'll go back to that. So, make a long story short, his dad comes out 3 times, and he leaves the Rangers a list of what would be in his son's backpack. And one of the things, a small day pack, was a Volkswagen key, and you know on some of the Volkswagen older keys there's like a VW etched in at the top? It's one of the things. Fast forward to October 76, and 12 miles into the wilderness, there's some backpackers in there and they find some things that make them uncomfortable. Well, they ended up finding the backpack hanging on a tree. And they thought they found some bones. So, stars and things were lining up for me because I found a notice on a website related to Crater Lake that there was a retired ranger that actually found his remains. So I went back and I looked him up, and it turns out that during the school year in Medford, Oregon, he was a science teacher at a junior high. And then during the summer, for 30 years, he would take his family to Crater Lake, and he was a law enforcement ranger. His name was Mariner. And I just went to his house and knocked on his door one day. And his wife and he invited me in, and we ended up sitting and talking for 4 hours. Nicest guy you ever want to meet. And he goes, Dave, how strange is it that you're asking me about the one case in my 30 years that is the strangest case I'll ever tell you? I said, I want to hear it. He goes, well, so we get this report, so me and my ranger partner get on the horses and we go back into the wilderness. And we go up into this box canyon where a small creek goes in and comes out. And we walk up to this giant Douglas fir that's kind of cutting the valley in half. And I step up to the top of the Douglas fir and I'm looking down the other side. And I see, because imagine that if you took your pants off, you unbuckled your belt, unbuttoned your button, dropped your fly, and dropped your pants down to your shoes. And then you just disappeared. I'm looking down at that scene, but I'm seeing socks with no shoes. And I see one broken tibia, shin bone, in the right leg. But that's it. And I reach down and I touch the socks, and there's little bones in the socks. But there's nothing else. And on the other side, there's the top of a skull sitting there, and little tiny fragments of bones. He says, I'm not a brain surgeon, Dave, but he goes, I've recovered a lot of bodies in the woods over the years. I've never not found boots. 100 years somebody's missing. I'll find their boots. I also never found his coat, his camera, or his knife. And my partner and I said, something is really wrong. So they put up perimeter tape, they leave, and they call in an FBI evidence response team from Portland. They flew in by helicopter and they worked that scene for 10 days. Two things about this. It was, in the words of Mary, impossible for that boy to get from where he was at Lakeside to where he was found in the middle of winter. Impossible. What killed him? They couldn't determine. But the bone chips were so small. And he said there was underwear inside there, but they never found shoes, never found his coat, never found his camera, never found his knife. He said, he goes, I got to tell you, I don't believe it was natural or what happened because I know what happened. It wasn't normal. Okay. David Allen Scott. This is on the east side of Yosemite. Mono Village, right outside of Bridgeport, California. Huge mountains. This is a valley with a huge mountain on this side. Twin Lakes. Families camping down here in the valley. David disappears. And the families, this is a fairly small area, probably the size of the property that this lodge is on, where people camp. And he's looking at his son. He turns away and he goes, that's how fast he disappeared. He's only 2 years old. So, big search. And after the 3rd or 4th day, the family said, my son got kidnapped. And you hear this from families more and more in these cases. So they bring in a set of dogs, and the dogs start crisscrossing their way up the side of this giant mountain. And the family's laughing, saying, my son didn't go up there. And his handler's saying, there's some sense there. Next one. So this is kind of a Google view of this mountain is huge. It disappears here. So there's a zigzag switchback trail with nothing on the side of this mountain. You're way up there. And you can sit and you can look down at the lake as you're switchbacking and going up. So they go up this, and they go back over the top of this down into a little valley. The dog stops tracking, but they bring in the Air Force and the Army, and they start combing this area. One of the guys starts walking up the side of this mountain, and he's now 3,000 feet above the valley floor. He goes around a boulder, and there is David Scott, naked except for the eye. So they interviewed this Air Force man, and they said, was there any obvious sign of injury to the boy? Or because you need to talk to the sheriff. I'm not saying anything. The other thing about this, as you're at the campsite, you can see who's traversing that trail up the side of the mountain. So how David Allen Scott got here is the $1 million question. Garrett Bardsley, Kubert Lake, Wheaton Mountains, 12 years old. He and his dad were fishing with a group of scouts. Everyone's asleep back at the campsite, and Garrett and his dad are fishing at the lake in the early morning. He partially falls in, gets his shoes and socks wet, and he goes, hey Dad, I'm going to go back to camp, change my shoes and socks, and get right back. So, it's about 100 yards back to the camp. And it's through a short tree line, and then you're at the camp. He goes, yeah, go ahead. His dad says, I watch him walk back and go through the tree line. Go beside him. An hour goes by. He doesn't come back. His dad goes back. People say, hey, maybe. Giant search. They find one thing at Garrett's. They find his sock 390 feet above the trail in a group of boulders. He's never found it. Next. Jill Hatch. There's actually somebody, this is within probably 25 miles of where that firefighter paramedic from Arcadia is. Kind of strange. 7 years old, fishing with her dad in an area called Camp Shidek. And she and her dog are hanging out together, and she tells her dad, hey, I'm gonna go down the creek and get back to mom or something. She disappears. Impossible to get lost because she's following the creek back to camp. They search and search and search. They find her on the side of a mountain, 3,000 feet up from the creek she disappeared. Days later, in the middle of a snowstorm, dead. So, slow down here for a second. I want everyone to understand something. These aren't normal. If this was your son or daughter and you accepted this as normal, something's wrong. And why these issues haven't gotten more exposure, it's an easy answer. We call it the hopscotch effect. There's not 6 of these cases that happen in 1 month in one area. These are hopscotching all over the U.S., sometimes in 10-day intervals, sometimes in 2-day intervals. But they're occurring more and more regularly. And if you look at my book, there were more cases like this last year than any other year we can find on record. Would you accept that as normal? How about David Scott? Would that be normal? Go ahead. Keith Parkins disappeared in Ridge, Oregon. This is kind of in the northeast section of Oregon. His grandparents own a ranch. He disappears. Parents start looking. Everyone starts looking. Huge search. 19 hours later, over 2 mountain ranges, 3 creeks, and 4 barbed wire fences, 2-year-old Keith Parkins is found unconscious in a dry creek bed on the fringe of death from exposure. Lives. Believable journey? Now, you want to know the real killer to everybody on our team? You know who found him? His dad. His dad was with 3 other people searching that creek bed and found his son. There is not one search and rescue person in the world that will tell you to search 19 hours later, 12 miles out for a 2-year-old boy. Why were they at that location at that time? The only explanation can be something real strange was going out there and they knew that it was. So, I got orders from Jim that I was supposed to take a break 25 minutes ago. So I'm really sorry. Let's take a 15-minute break and we'll come back together and hit it again.